Hi, this is Stephen Brower, Round Valley Community College. This is for Computer Literacy Summer 2017, and this is part 2 of the Access 17A. Not the overview one, but the overview kind of showed a high level. The part 1 and part 2 is going to get a little bit of details. So previously in part 1, now I didn't get exactly to what I'm about to show right here, but previously in part 1, I entered in the columns, and I entered in I think some joke data, but this would be, in terms of 17A, I believe it's the 3 values that, or the 3 rows that are entered prior to the import that takes place. Instead of this being a complete data entry exercise, what we have is there actually is an Excel file. Let me just go and open the Excel file. And what the Excel file has is the data, additional data that's going to be brought into an existing table. So if I can just try to, if I can, put these side by side, the columns here should match. I'm just taking a peek, just double checking that. Yeah, so the columns here should match, and the idea is that we don't want to remove this table, that the table has already been created, there are already some data in here. We just want to append this data into the table that's there. So what can be, or one thing that, or what can be done is under external data, we can bring in from an Excel file. Now we have to pick and find where the file is. And so I have this as a, practice, starter file. There's the students is the one that I'm going to be bringing in. So I have the what. What I want to do is append to this table, and so I picked the what, the file I'm going to import. I picked that I want to append it to this table. Now, what already was defaulted is that the first column contains headings. So the first row in the Excel file actually had headings, which should match the columns that we have here. This is an opportunity where we can go in and maybe override in terms of the import. We actually could skip maybe some columns because maybe what we're bringing in has one extra column. In terms of 17A, we're not going to go into the details of controlling the import, but we're just going to say, let's go and bring the data in. If we're going to be appending regularly, we actually could save the steps, almost like, in a sense, like automating it for later. We're only doing this as a one-shot deal for getting the data in, so there's not a need for us to save the steps that we have. So now that I did the append, then these additional fields, these additional rows have been added to the students table. We're also going to go through the same or similar steps for creating a new table. This is going to be the faculty advisors table. We're going to be doing it as new. I'll make sure that the first row says it contains the column headings. Now this is where we could go in and change the fields that we have, but what I do want to do is set up my own primary key as being the faculty ID, and then it's a matter of naming it. So I'm going to put in front here, sorry, this will be last name, first name, 17A faculty advisors. And I don't need to say the steps because hopefully I'm not going to go and do this again. And this should have created then the faculty advisors table. So the importing of data from Excel is something that, at least for our exercise that we're going to have here in 17A, can save us from having to type all the data in. The conceptual thing that's being shown is that sometimes we do need to import data from another source. And what happens a number of times in business is we get our data from somewhere else, from another source, and we have to then take the data in a form that can be imported into the database that we have. And sometimes things you use are like comma delimited files or anyway, but we got the data in. So that was just one key thing that was being done in terms of the 17A. What is not being done in 17A is setting up a relationship between the tables. In my overview video, I showed a relationship between the students and the advisors. In 17B, you will be setting up relationships between tables, but not for these here that we have just done. Now I'm going to deviate from the book because I just want to sort of at a high level try to show some of the things that are being done. But I'm going to, and this is one of those things that's more a positional thing. If you notice, the present moment faculty advisors is highlighted, and if I come over here to create and I go into the create wizard, what it does is it actually had defaulted to the faculty advisors because that is what I had highlighted, and we could then go and pick students and go on from there. What I want to do, let me just cancel and start over, is if students is highlighted, because I know I want to create a query from the students table. Then when I go to the query wizard and hit OK, it automatically has selected, because I did highlight it here first, the table, and now I can go and pick the IDs that, I'm sorry, the fields that I want for this table. Ooh, hang on. I may be getting these fields wrong, but what we did is we picked a handful of fields, and I might be getting the order of these things incorrect, but the idea is I'm not picking all the fields, I'm picking a handful of the fields, and we'll call this the all student query. And again, I may have deviated from the book, but the idea is that the query is different than the underlying table itself. In other words, the table, this is the source of all the data, has all the columns, and then a query, sometimes for queries we only have a subset of the fields. So let's say we just wanted a contact list. If that's what this is being used for, we only need, maybe phone and email. We don't need all the other fields. So that's one thing that was being done here, is for the creating of the query. And I know I went through this quickly. I'm trying to get it into the next 7 minutes with the other things that I want to do as well. My overview video showed a couple other queries that are probably a little more meaningful. I do want to show me all the students in the city, where you actually enter the city and show me this, the 5 students that owe the most money. So the overview video actually has a couple more meaningful queries than what's here. But a key thing is to point out is that the table here, this is where the underlying data is actually in. A query, all that's really being saved in terms of a query is a question. And if one way to go back, if I go into the design view, what's being saved is the indication of these columns are being used for creating the query. And just to maybe freak out some people just for a second, I'm going to go to the SQL view. Structured query language, this is the actual underlying query. And in a sense, this is what's really being saved behind the scenes. It's just that Access has a GUI where it can take this saved query and then interpret it graphically on the screen. But structured query language has keywords. Here's select and here's from. It's what we're selecting and where we're selecting it from. So technically, this is actually a query, and there are courses where they go through and learn the syntax of this. And I'm sorry for maybe scaring some people with that, but I just kind of wanted to show that what's really saved behind the scenes is the question, not the actual data itself. And again, I'm not going in order, and I may not be doing this right, but one of the other things that is done in terms of this 17A is we're looking at the creation of a form. And once again, if I already have students highlighted and then I click form, then it is going to create sort of a default, given the fields that the table has. We end up with fields on this screen. And again, I'm deviating from the book a little bit. Let me just go and save this, and we'll call this the student's form. In the overview video that I did, I actually, because I linked the two tables together, I made this, the faculty advisor ID, a drop-down list. So if I'm working on a student, I actually can go to the drop-down list and pick a faculty advisor off the list. But the idea in terms of a form is that if we're doing data entry, this is an easier thing to see basically a record all at once. And it's easier to sort of like navigate through in terms of just a record. And as my other video showed, we actually can do things like doing drop-down lists. So things can be controlled a little more through the GUI for a form than it would be through a data sheet view. The last thing that is done, and I'm not thrilled with the way that they do that, is they actually have us go and create a report. And what they had us do is like what I just did right here, is it just created from the table all of the fields. And let me just go and save this without any changes. What might have been better, and I am deviating from the book when I do this, is if we had used the report wizard, which is like the query wizard. Then we could pick just the columns that we want. Ooh, I've forgotten, hang on, which is campus, last, first, and email. I'm not going to any grouping. Oh, was there a sort on that one? Again, I might be deviating from the book, but let me put the sort on last name. We'll do it as tabular. And actually we'll call it the faculty advisor's report. And I'll finish this. Now, what I just went through, I'm deviating from the book. But by going through the wizard, we can pick just the fields that we want in the order that we want. I realized I screwed up the order. Oops, sorry. And I think that's what is done in terms of what the book has us go through is they do it more in a design view, and we're shuffling these columns around. Now, I did kind of botch this, and I do apologize about that. And actually, there's an easier way to move things around, but we actually can. Anyway, what the chapter we'll get through is how we can, in this view, sort of lay things out a little bit better. But what I was trying to do, and I just didn't do a good job of that, I can just say this anyway. But what I was trying to do was saying that if we went through, let me go back again, I had the table highlighted and I did the report wizard, that the idea is that if we plan ahead of time the fields that we want, it can make the editing of the report go easier than having to shuffle fields around. I didn't exactly do it, but that's what I was intending. Okay, real quick, the last thing I want to point out is, oops, pause. All right, this may not work exactly the way I wanted to, but if you notice, well, let me go click on this. This is the database that I'm in. I'm calling it the part 2 because I'm doing it for the demo, is 760K in size. And if I, under the database tools, pick compact and repair. Now, you don't have to do this step. I'm just trying to point something out. What it will do, and it just did it real quick, is, now if you notice, it went from 7 something to here it is only 5 something. So what Access sometimes ends up doing is there's like this clutter that ends up in the database, and